Hello, I'm Jim Collette, Director of Operations here at First Methodist. And as we continue our Advent series, we thought we'd focus on Christmas songs, Christmas carols, and maybe other songs that mean something special to each of us. And so I want to share with you a particular memory about a song we all know. In my teaching career, I spent a great deal of it as a teacher at McCamey High School. I taught American history, government, and all those upper level courses, mostly to juniors and seniors. It was a fairly small school, of course, as you may know. And so everyone pretty much knew everyone, and many of the kids had grown up year after year together from elementary on up. And so they were kind of tightly knit. But we had an opportunity a few times while I was teaching there to bring in a foreign exchange student to live with the family there and go to school. And as you might think, that was a pretty big deal for a little school because we didn't have that very often. We didn't have a really, really different student like that. And so in the mid-'80s, we had a student named Anka Kempkins who came from Germany. Really cute little girl. And like many foreign exchange students, she really struggled at first because here she was in a whole different culture, a different school culture, not well versed in the English language at the beginning. And then she's thrust into a class of a subject that she knows almost nothing about, American history. So, as I would do, you work with them, of course, to help them along the way. And then what is fun is to watch them bloom into this really good student, which they've been all along, that is hard to see at first. And become part of the culture there, be accepted by the kids. And it was really always a great thing to watch. In those years, I also sponsored a chapter at school of something that was called the Junior Historians. They are an organization that operates under the auspices of the Texas State Historical Association. And they're primarily for secondary students to have an opportunity to learn and study about their own local history and share that. You can write papers for a state level competition, get your papers published. There are conventions. So there's a lot of cool things you can do. And so we did some of those, but also when I could, I like to take them to see the history around them, things that are in their own community, the little museum perhaps. But when possible, we took field trips to other places as well. So we might go to see a museum in another town, we might go to see a historic site, even archaeological ruins, things like that. Well, one of the places that I knew about was in San Angelo. Old Fort Concho, the fort that was established there in the 1870s on the frontier, had an event that had been going on a few years at that time called Christmas at Old Fort Concho. And it was kind of a combination of a Christmas market. There were all kinds of things for sale from all these different vendors. But it was also a reenactment. They had historical reenactors. For a few years, they did a whole pageant about Western history in San Angelo. There would be all these food vendors, so you could sample all kinds of unique foods, chuck wagon cooking, things like that. There were events for kids to do. You could just walk around and just get this whole feel for just a fun event, but also, I thought, pretty educational. So on a Saturday, it was always in the first weekend in December. In fact, it's still going on. I went there just a few years ago. Took a van load of the kids up there. And because the girl with whom Anka was living was very active in junior historians, then of course Anka went along with us on those trips, and also to give her a chance to expose her to more of the culture of the area. So we're there. And one of the things they were doing in those years is there's a little chapel that's been restored on the post grounds. And throughout the day, they would have these small church services that were done by local church communities, which kind of gave you a sense of what their service was like. For example, there'd be a service from an African American church, or there might be a service from a Baptist church or a Catholic church. So several of them throughout the day were scheduled in the program. And I thought it might be a good idea if we kind of took in part of those or some of those. So we would drop by a time or two to see one. So it was late in the day. It was dark, really getting beyond dark. And as the sun went down each day, they would light all these luminarias all over the fort grounds. And so you get these beautiful lit pathways. And then in the parade ground, where the reenactors were, they would have their campfires. And so the smoke and the evening light and the lighting, it was just beautiful. It was almost like stepping back into another century. So I thought that was great. But we go over to the chapel for this service that's taking place. And it's a real tiny building. You probably can't get 30, 40 people in there. And so it was already full of the congregation and those who'd come with them for their service. But we got up to the door, and we were all kind of just, the few of us were, the junior historians were there in the door. And so the light was coming out as it got dark, and we could hear the service and kind of see what was going on. And so they did their little service. And then, as many churches do, in fact, as we do at First Methodist, at the end of the service, they turned the lights down and they lit candles, and they began singing Silent Night. And so that alone is just a beautiful memory of the way the candlelight was flooding out on us, and the frosty feel of the night and all. But that isn't why I don't remember that moment. Because I don't know which congregation they were. I'm going to guess maybe something like Lutheran that had this in their background or their heritage. But as they're singing Silent Night, they start singing one of the verses in German. And I looked over at Anka. And you know how you talk about a person's face lighting up? And it's kind of an expression, but that was not. Already in the glow of the candlelight, but her face, her expression just came powerfully alive. Here she was from Germany, in a strange country with this language, and here in this really even stranger place where she's on the grounds of a military fort from over 100 years before, in this whole situation. But suddenly, in the midst of that, she hears the words of a Christmas song in her language, and I feel like it must have carried her back to her own memories of Christmas at home. It was just beautiful to see. And you know, isn't that really what Christmas is about? I mean, isn't that what Christ did? He came to bring us back home again. And that if we are lucky, we have those special moments that live with us down through the years. And wherever we are, when we hear that particular song, it carries us home to that special moment. Have a Merry Christmas.